DC Mayor Muriel Bowser's decision to remove Black Lives Matter Plaza has sent shockwaves through our region and across the country. The mural served as a symbol for equal rights and a visual representation that Washington, D.C. was leading the way for change. News 4's An Yang sat down with a local professor to discuss the move by the mayor and the impact it will have for years to come.
Now, that intro was absolutely and objectively ridiculous and absurd from top to bottom. According to this local news reporter, the decision from DC Mayor Muriel Bowser to remove the words Black Lives Matter from the streets of this area in the District of Columbia have sent shockwaves across not just the region, but the nation as a whole, because this was a symbol that the District of Columbia was leading the way into the future, leading the way in terms of equality, and therefore, by removing this yellow paint from the street, we're absolutely destroying the future of equality or whatever. Honestly, this is one of the most ridiculously absurd things I could possibly imagine, because I had no clue, even though there were shockwaves rippling across the country, that this was being removed until somebody else had sent me a tip on this. And I'm sure many of you out there in the audience don't even think about what is painted on the streets of the District of Columbia, other than the fact that today we're going to laugh about this. And by the way, credit where credit is due to the evil Orange Man's administration. Essentially, we had a bill in Congress that was going to force this removal, and rather than Muriel Bowser have to deal with the humiliation of them forcing her to remove this, she has decided to do it on her own, because she understands that there's going to be consequences from the Republican Congress, who does have a lot of control over the District of Columbia, for keeping this nonsense up here. And make no mistake about it, this was put up in order to satiate a violent, rabid political movement that was rioting and destroying our country back in 2020, and now it's being removed, and you have the local news going out of their way to try to find people that are outraged by it, because most people don't give a damn about this. They thought it was stupid at the time, but due to cultural pressures, due to the fact that you could get fired from your job for saying so, most people just went super quiet. Now, of course, DC voted overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party, so obviously we understand that you're going to find people more in favor of it over there. But that being said, with the recent crime waves that they've had in DC due to woke criminal justice reform, I think maybe, just maybe, they're sick of the Black Lives Matter stuff, just like the rest of us. Now, we're going to get into this, we're going to break this down, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
DC Mayor Muriel Bowser says the Black Lives Matter mural on 16th Street will be painted over. The bright yellow letters that spell out Black Lives Matter became symbolic nationwide after the murder of George Floyd.
So a huge part of me wants to defend the English language and wants to defend the term symbolic, because in no way, shape, or form should we consider the literal writing of the words Black Lives Matter to be a symbol at all, because it's the words, it's not something that represents that idea conceptually. But what this is actually symbolic of is not the idea that black people matter. Most people understand that. In fact, people on the right who didn't want to defund the police understand that far, far more than people on the left. But it was symbolic of the absolute takeover, the absolute destruction of our country, the hostage taking that occurred during the Black Lives Matter riots period, because these people were destroying major cities, rioting for days after days, months after months, almost a full year straight, most dangerous riots or most destructive riots in American history. And they were able to get their logo, their ideas, their endorsements paid for by the taxpayer across our major cities, including in our nation's capital. And this was while, by the way, the evil Orange Man was president.
Joining us now to talk about the impact of this change is Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead, the founding executive director of the Carson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice at Loyola University. Thanks for joining us. So it may not come as a surprise that this is happening, but it will certainly leave a mark, not just from the obvious visual standpoint. Can you talk about the emotional significance of painting over these words?
So they bring out this professor who's the professor of race, ethnic, whatever, critical race, who gives a damn, woke studies over at Loyola University, and all I can ask for is for Congress to actually follow through and start defunding these departments, because we shouldn't have a professor of DEI and race and whatever being paid for largely by tax dollars and being subsidized by federal student loans. But you know what? I'm not giving her a fair chance. I'm not giving her a fair break. Maybe, just maybe, she doesn't hold absolutely every position that we all know for a fact that she holds based on her title alone.
Having to wrestle with the fact that not only are we at a different place in terms of the administration, we're at a different place in terms of people's feelings around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're at a different place when it comes to the erasure of historic programs in Black history and women's history. We're now seeing that the next step is removing or covering up these visual representations that were so important during the Black Lives Matter movement, these historical markers that we have looked at as being the way of understanding how it is that an organization, that an institution, that a city wrestles with something that is so important.
Is that actually the words that came out of this woman's face right here? She just talked about how, oh, we're in a different situation with DEI and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And I totally understand that. And honestly, that's fair commentary. I'm going to set that aside and say we just agree to disagree on that. But let's be peaceful. Let's, share a country together. But then she said they're erasing the symbols, these things of historical significance that mark certain periods of time in American history. And that is honestly absolutely tragic. That is honestly absolutely terrible, which, would be a good thing for her to have expressed back in 2020 when they were ripping down statues of our founding fathers, when they were ripping down all these different various symbols across our country that marked significant moments in our nation's history. But for some reason, 100 to 200 to 250 plus years of American history, depending on which monument needed to be taken down in any given moment, that's totally fine to erase. That's totally fine to eradicate. That's totally fine to destroy in a cultural revolution. But this 4-year-old lettering that is on the street in the District of Columbia, this yellow paint, that is a symbol. That is something that is truly significant in American history, and that's something that we need to keep with us in our hearts at all times. I just want to point out again that the Atlanta Football Hall of Fame that was destroyed and looted by Black Lives Matter is more significant in terms of American history than these words being painted on the street in the District of Columbia. Again, all of the things associated with the Black Lives Matter riots are all negative. All the policy changes that they got put into effect are all terrible. All the cultural changes are all evil, absolutely nonsensical in every possible way. And of course, it was all done to promote this woman's ideology that now she wants to commit backdate into our history, but not too far back in our history, because if it was actually historical, she would want to tear it down, because this woman spoke out in no way, shape, or form against the historic symbols of our country being destroyed by these very Black Lives Matter rioters and the politicians that endorse it.
Yes, and you talk about the ripple effects. What do you think the reaction will be to the change here in the city and nationwide, especially once that mural is gone?
You're going to have this camp of people who are like me, who are concerned about what does it mean to move down this path of erasure.
The Black Lives Matter rioters, need I remind you, burned St. John's Church in the District of Columbia, a church that opened in the year 1816. It is often referred to as the President's Church. They have a pew that is referred to as the Presidential Pew, and they burned that because when they were trying to attack the White House and get at the evil Orange Man, Secret Service was able to repel them, so they decided to take their revenge on that historical monument, on that historical landmark, and then they were rewarded by the city after taking it hostage, after destroying portions of it with these letterings. And yes, it is a good thing that we're erasing it. It is a good thing that we're setting it aside, because it's absolute nonsense in every possible way.
Kind of a second camp, I would say it's people who are happy that it's being removed. We know that Black Lives Matter was not celebrated across the board. We know that Black Lives Matter is considered to be something that was divisive, and people thought we were saying only Black Lives Matter, and we were saying Black Lives Matter too. Like, in addition to other lives matter, we were saying our lives matter as well, specifically when it comes to a conversation around police brutality.
Honestly, I'm so sick of the left and the ridiculous talking points. I'm so sick of their nonsense. The idea that Black people matter, that Black Lives Matter, is something that almost nobody in the entire country disagrees with. We were not confused about the message of Black Lives Matter. What we understood is that the organization, the ideas, came with a lot more than Black people shouldn't be killed. In fact, it wasn't even about Black people being killed, because what they wanted to do was defund the police, and that led to way more Black people being killed, as the murder rate jumped 30% year over year post the George Floyd Black Lives Matter riots. So we understood 100% it wasn't about that. It was an anti-American ideology that we did not support. They love to play this game, and they've been doing it for now 10 years, where they say, oh, you disagree with Black Lives Matter? That means you don't think black people deserve to live, and everybody says, no, that's ridiculous. But it's all the other stuff, you know, the rioting, the burning stuff, the B-roll that you're running right now, which of course they're showing people rip up Black Lives Matter signs, but there's much more than that was actually caused by the Black Lives Matter rioters. That's the part that we're against. That's the stuff that we're not on board with. It's just like Antifa, where they're like, it doesn't exist, it's no big deal. But by the way, it just means anti-fascist. And then you point out that they're attacking old ladies, they're throwing bricks through walls, they're burning public housing in the city of Minneapolis and causing all this kind of destruction that makes no sense at all if they were just anti the fascists, just anti the Nazis, because they never seem to be attacking anybody who's actually a fascist or an actual Nazi. They seem to be attacking regular, ordinary, normal people who are engaged in politics that are just slightly right of center many a times, or even left of center. And in addition to that, they start attacking random people, random property, because they're communist scum.
And then there's a third group of people, and those are the ones I'm most concerned about, who are not even going to know that there's a difference. Like, they never paid attention to it. They don't know why it was significant. And so when it gets removed, they're not even aware that this really signifies a huge shift in where we're moving as a nation.
What are other changes you're expecting to see, as city leaders have said that they have to work with this new administration strategically?
I'm expecting to see a lot of challenges in cities around the country where any visible markers dealing with freedom, representation, equity, diversity, inclusion will be challenged. And I'm expecting that mayors might take the path of least resistance, which is what I see happening in Washington, D.C. Rather than fighting the president and fighting the representatives on this, it's easier to just remove it, with the idea that if I just play along at this moment, then maybe I can be in a better position to get what I need for my city going down the road.
Look, we want the shift. We want to move away from the Black Lives Matter ideology. We want to force these people to actually have sensible policies. And we talked about this on this channel before, but the city of Philadelphia, post Larry Krasner being elected, so before George Floyd's death, ended up having dramatic spikes in homicide. And recently, in the last year, the homicide rate actually dropped very dramatically because Larry Krasner, a Soros woke district attorney, was forced to finally prosecute repeat offenders. The political pressure ended up getting to him, and that is yet another indication, another marker that this Black Lives Matter nonsense is getting gone. Now, of course, every time they interview somebody on the streets of DC that's against them removing this,
it's tragic. You know, this really meant a lot to us as a community when we were really dealing with and struggling with the murder of George Floyd, and to see it just be erased really strikes at the heart of our community.
They're a political activist or a professor or something like that. There was a clip of somebody that was holding a DC statehood now sign that was also offended by this, so nobody should be surprised that these are the people, the professional activist class, that are upset about this. But normal people across the country are not feeling the shockwaves of this being removed. They either don't care or support it, and that's where we should be in this country.
I think it's very shameful because the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the attack on protests such as Black Lives Matter, I think it's an attempt to erase us and our struggle and our history, and it's wrong, and I'm just sorry that the mayor felt that she had to give in to that extortion.
Now, with all that being said, I'm going to leave this topic right here and open the floor up to all of you guys out there in the audience. Let me know what you think about them removing this lettering. Do you think it's good? Probably, if you're my audience, you're going to say yes, but what do you think about them trying to gin up the hysteria related to this when it's actually not there? In addition to that, again, what other things do you want removed that are relics from the Black Lives Matter movement? As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Black Lives Matter Plaza being renamed and the fake outrage over it. Till next time.